Chicago Regency, at the Hyatt Regency Chicago on East Wacker Drive. The BGA is having its annual luncheon. Should be an exciting event. We're honoring Justice John Paul Stevens for his lifelong commitment to a lot of good causes, including good government. And he will be introduced at that event by Judge Ann Williams, who sits on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. The Ricketts family, new owners of the Cubs, are hosting a pre-lunch reception. We're hoping more than 800 people come. And I will tell you that if you believe the cause of good government is a just one, and you think that we have some thoughts and some ideas and some goals in that direction, I would encourage you to consider coming to our luncheon. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We can only survive and thrive with the help of people who believe in what we're doing. We don't take money from politicians or elected officials or PACs or political parties. We are only as strong as the people who believe in us, and that's some companies, some foundations, and lots of real people. So that's the pitch. We have some information in back on the BGA and on the luncheon. But for tonight, let's talk about TIFs. And to get that started, we have our policy and government relations coordinator, Emily Miller, who is driving the policy agenda of the BGA, and she'll introduce the panel and get things started. So thanks. Emily?
Hello. Oh. Whoa. Oh my God. Yeah, I'm all right. Well, hello. Hello. Welcome tonight. I'm so glad. This is just such a testament to how much this conversation needs to be had. I can't believe how full this room is. This is really exciting. So we have a great panel for tonight. I'm really looking forward to everything that folks have to say. Right here we've got Ben Jarofsky, who a lot of you may know from his work in The Reader. He also has a blog that's called, what is it called again? The Third City, that's right. And he blogs about everything, anything and everything. I've read it. I don't know where the inspiration for these things comes from, but yes, anything and everything is what comes out of Ben Jarofsky on that blog. Yeah. Then we have Thomas Henderson. Tom is the executive director of the Illinois Tax Increment Association. I was lucky enough to attend a conference that they had last week here in Chicago about TIFs and about the way municipalities across the state use TIFs in a way that is advantageous to their communities. I learned a lot about the different ways that different municipalities use TIFs. I think in Chicago we tend to have a set view of the way that TIFs are used, and my eyes were really opened by attending that conference. So they do a lot of work with, their membership are those municipalities from across Illinois, and they work to make sure that the taxing bodies are sort of all together with the city governments to make TIFs run smoothly. Accurate? Okay. And then we have Rachel Weber, who's a professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago. She is an expert when it comes to TIFs. She's published a lot of things on TIFs and urban planning in general. She is sort of a go-to if you do a Google search for TIFs and experts, her name will come up. And she has led conversations and panels and things like that on urban planning and policy across the region. And so I'm just really excited to have her here. She's going to get us started with sort of an introduction. I think that it's hard to have a conversation unless we're all on the same page as to what a TIF is exactly. And frankly, I had no idea what a TIF was. I had heard about it for years. I'm a relatively smart person, went to law school, have been involved in politics, for years, and I still couldn't quite nail down what it was. And it took me a long time to nail it down. So I think it's important to kind of all get a baseline level of knowledge, and then we can proceed with the panel conversation. And again, I'll remind folks, if you have questions, Andy will wrap up his questions, and then we'll turn to audience questions. You do need to write those down and just hold them up in the air, and I or somebody else will come around and grab those from you. Okay, so let's get started. Rachel?
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Emily. Can you all hear me? Is it on? Am I on? I apologize, I have a little bit of a cold, so... Can you hear me?
I don't think your mic is on. Which is not a big deal because this is loud. Is it?
You can hear me now? You can hear me.
You might be better off taking it out of there and just putting it closer.
Okay.
I learned that along the way. I can't remember where.
All right. So thank you, Emily, for that very kind introduction. I thought what I would do is just in 10 minutes, I'll try to time myself, just give you a little primer, the sort of TIF 101. And we'll try to be as uninflected as possible, meaning I just want to sort of present you with sort of the facts and nothing but the facts. And then we'll have a debate about how we interpret how TIF has been used in the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois after that. So TIF is basically a municipal financing tool. It is not a new tax. It's not a tax abatement. I think there's some confusion about that. It's essentially a tool for harnessing future property tax revenues to pay for current expenditures and for reallocating property tax revenues from a city's general fund to a smaller, more local neighborhood or sort of sub-jurisdiction, a TIF district. And Illinois is not the first state to use TIF. TIFs have been around since the mid-50s. The state of California was the first state to experiment with TIF. And it was basically a creative way of matching federal urban renewal dollars. Basically, they said, the state of California said, we'll allow municipalities to basically pledge future property tax revenues as sort of security against current borrowing. And that was one of the ways in which they were able to garner additional federal funds for urban renewal style projects. So the mechanism spread eastward in the 1970s, and the state of Illinois, along with several other states in the area, adopted TIF. In Illinois, we passed the legislation in 1977. And one of the reasons why we did this, if you think back to what was taking place in the 1970s, is that states, especially the upper Midwest and large cities, were hemorrhaging jobs, manufacturing jobs, industrial jobs, both to their suburbs, to southern states, and then out of the country altogether. So originally, looking at some of the floor debate about when TIF was passed in 1977, it was really intended to be a sort of industrial retention expansion type of a mechanism, a way that municipalities could try to pin down increasingly mobile businesses and manufacturers in particular. Also around this time, states were beginning to impose restrictions on how much debt municipalities could take on, and also what their property tax rates could be, or what the growth in property taxes could be. We call these, in Illinois, the PTEL, property tax expenditure limitations. And TIF became one way in which municipalities could circumvent some of those limits and in theory obviate some of the need for very unpopular tax hikes. TIF also became part of the kind of bidding for business that we've all become familiar with, where states, municipalities, regions are competing for capital, for businesses and for real estate investment. But part of the popularity of TIF in the 1970s, as it is today, is that it's a very flexible tool, as opposed to other kinds of municipal financing strategies. TIF offers municipal governments, without a lot of oversight from the state and none from the feds, access to a cache of spatially earmarked funds, and municipal officials, planners, have a lot of flexibility in how they use those. So what municipalities do is they designate a particular area as a TIF district, and then they use the future growth in property tax revenues to help subsidize development there. In order to designate a TIF district, an area has to meet two primary qualifications, and this is true in Illinois as it is in most states across the country. The area in question has to be blighted, and these are some of the blighting factors you can find in the state enabling legislation. They're basically just taken from the state's urban renewal statutes that were drafted in the 40s and 50s. And so an area has to be blighted, and so these are some, it has to be old, the properties in the area have to be older, deteriorated, depreciated, excessively vacant or abandoned, overcrowded. You see the list up here. In Illinois, we also allow areas, we designate them, municipality can designate an area as a conservation area, which basically means that while there might not be currently a lot of blight, or may not be a lot of these factors met, because of a number of factors, the area has the potential of becoming blighted in the future. So that's one criteria that has to be met. A second criteria that municipal officials have to attest to is that private developers would not be attracted to the area, would not be interested in investing in the area without public assistance. We call this the but-for requirement. But for the use of TIF, private development would not be taking place in this area. So in 21 states and the District of Columbia, local governments have to make a finding that before creating the TIF district, that redevelopment would not reasonably be expected to occur solely through private investment or within this reasonable foreseeable future. Unfortunately, enforcement of these criteria is relatively scant, and the discretion for sort of the finding of both the blight and but-for is left to the same local officials who are responsible